Good afternoon, welcome or welcome back. If it's the first time that you have joined us, it's a pleasure to have you here. If you were with us last week, then it's a pleasure to have you back. The intent of this session is to add some value and to give you some practical tools and tips to survive the most extraordinary times that we're currently living in. So if you're joining us off an email that a friend sent you, which is quite possible, then what I'd like you to do is to shoot me an email to mike@mikehouse.com.au, and that'll give us the chance to include you on the list, and we'll send you the details of future events. Basically, our plan is to do this at 2 p.m. Perth time every week for as long as it's needed. Given the state of play around the world at the moment, that could be any amount of time, we're not sure. So a couple of things just summing up from last week. I mentioned my book, Thrive and Adapt, and there was an invite to grab a free PDF copy of that. If you are like me, you'll be noticing that your emotional state is a little bit up and down at the moment. It's we're pretty much every day that you log into anything, there's more measures being taken by our government here in Australia and governments around the world to try and flatten the curve. And that is causing all sorts of impacts. I know many people personally who are completely without income at the moment, and some of those are in the state of wondering how they'll pay for food and rent. Others have a reasonable financial buffer, but their circumstances are uncertain. And some of us are in really, really high demand because of the way that people's behaviour and patterns are changing. So it's a really mixed bag. And that means that as we're kind of coming to grips with it, it varies how we'll respond to it. So the plan today is to talk to Dr. Jenny Brockis about a little bit of what we can do physically and mentally to keep us well during this time, because that's pretty critical stuff. Just before I head there, in the book, if you've already got a copy, pages 19 to 23 talk about our fight, flight or freeze response. And that's something that for all of us will be active at various levels during this time. It's a response that's designed to basically get us out of immediate life-threatening harm. And any time we feel threatened, it will activate to some degree. Now, the threat doesn't have to be immediate. And in circumstances like the one we're in, where the threat is a little bit invisible and there's still so many unknowns, that can just roll on. The challenge with it is that it's designed for short, sharp bursts of energy. If it's on all the time, it's really difficult for us to deal with that. So there's some useful tips there. And last week I spoke about the 3-step guerrilla mindfulness, which is a tactic for basically shutting fight, flight or freeze down. And if you recall that, it's 3 long, slow, rhythmic breaths, which turns off fight or flight. So you might like to just take 3 of those breaths with me now. It's a good way just to sort of settle yourself down. Step 2 is to say how you feel. And the important thing with this is not to get into the story of how you feel, but just the feeling itself. There's other times and places to actually process the emotion. And for me, in this moment, I feel a combination of anxious, excited to be with you all, and excited to be adding value in this kind of way. If you've got particular emotions on your mind, you might like to type them into the chat box as we go. That's a good way to connect with each other and see what's going on for us out there. And then the third step is to say what your intention is for whatever it is that you're either in the midst of or about to go into. It's a challenge for us in times like this to stay present and focused where we need to be. It's really easy for your head to be jumping around all over the place. And so my intention for this little half hour is to be 100% present with you and bring the best of what Jenny and I can to the table. So with that, let me just go and find Jenny in the collection of people here and unmute her. G'day, Jenny. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks, Mike. Lovely to be here with everybody.
Also surrounded by books. Great to see you. Jenny's a person I've known for some time. We've done a little bit of work together. She's a registered medical practitioner, a board-certified lifestyles medicine physician. She's an expert in brain health and mental well-being, and also in human connection, and all of those things are fairly critical to us right now. Jenny, maybe just as a starting point, what's the difference between this and the regular flu?
Oh, thanks for leading straight into that one, Mike. Okay. So what is the difference? There is a difference. They are both viruses. Coronavirus, though, is what they call a novel virus. It's a new virus that hasn't been known previously. And it's also recognized that traditionally about 3 or 4 new viruses sort of pop up every year. They're not always that harmful to us, but this one, unfortunately, has the potential to cause damage. The difference between coronavirus and the regular flu that most people associate with a sort of seasonal effect, you know, we come into winter time and we start going down with the sniffles and the colds and things like that, is that although they cause fairly similar symptoms and they both can potentially cause respiratory illness, the difference between coronavirus is that the onset is a little bit slower. When you go down with the flu, you tend to go down with it quite quickly. Coronavirus can be a bit more sneaky. You can be feeling absolutely fine and you actually have it. And of course, you don't feel unwell, so you're going around doing your own business as usual, and you're actually infectious and you're spreading it to others. And this is one of the big issues for people, because if you see somebody who's coughing and spluttering all over the place, you think, whoa, keep away, you know, you're sick. But not everybody with early coronavirus actually looks or feels ill, and that's probably the issue. It's really easy to catch it. We catch it in the same way as a regular flu, mostly from person to person with droplet spread. But the virus is also quite capable of living on hard surfaces. And there's a lot of argy-bargy about how long it can live on different types of surfaces, but we do know it can stay on a surface alive for anything from a few hours to a few days. And this is why there's been such a push on the hand washing, and anytime you touch anything that is in communal use, to wash your hands again immediately afterwards. So it's extremely easy to catch, more easy to catch than the regular flu, and it has the potential, unfortunately, to cause a more serious illness in those people who are affected badly. They reckon about 15% will get it badly, and of those, 5% will be critical, which means they actually need to be on a ventilator. And the biggest issue we face, of course, in our situation here is, do we have enough ventilators to go around? So one of the issues for us as a society, obviously, is to contain it, as you say, flatten the curve by limiting the potential to spread it, even though we feel absolutely fine. And that's why we've seen progressive signs of lockdown, et cetera, et cetera. So that, I think that's the sort of main difference between coronavirus and the regular flu. And of course, we have no treatment yet. They're talking about vaccines, which are going to be some time off. I think what might be more useful at the moment is a stress vaccine. I don't know about you, but so many people I'm speaking to, there's this undercurrent of anxiety and worry and uncertainty because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know how long we're going to be sort of subjected to these restrictions. But I think it is important to address it as if it is going to be a longer term issue. It's not going to be something that's going to be done and dusted in a few days or a few weeks. We're talking about months here, possibly longer. We just don't know. There's
a really good piece I mentioned briefly last week about the survivor personality. That's something that's researched fairly heavily in the world of psychology. And we talked about one of those attributes of people that survive against the odds is that they face the reality that they're facing square on. And part of that is not putting endpoints that are uncontrollable around things. So, you know, for prisoners of war, for example, the people that did well were the people who had the mindset of, we'll get out of this, but they didn't put an end date on it because they didn't have any control over that. So, you know, the people who were optimistic and said, oh, we'll be out of here by Easter, we'll be out of here by Fred's birthday, we'll be out of here by Christmas, each time that time frame rolled past, it's like another chip, and we're still not out of it. And so for me, part of this is going, we will be out of it, we just don't know how long it'll take. And that shift in mindset, I think, is something that we can fairly readily do, that definitely builds that longer term resilience. So, you know, I don't think there's anyone really yet that could realistically tell us how long this will be.
No, we're second guessing all along.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I agree. It's about acknowledging the situation and accepting how we feel about it, because I think particularly at this point in time, if you are feeling a little bit anxious, it's okay to feel that. That's quite a normal human response. And the worst thing to do, of course, is to suppress it, because that just aggravates the situation. And with the contagion effect, runs the risk of you causing anxiety in other people. And especially if you're at home with your family, you don't want that contagion to be affecting your partner or your kids, because your kids pick up everything that you're experiencing.
Absolutely. So on that front, Jenny, staying mentally well, it's, you know, we're talking about this with regard to the comparatively recent bushfires in Australia, and, you know, the doing part where you can turn up and fight something almost has its own mental resilience built in, because you're actively facing the threat. In this case, it feels almost as if wash your hands and maintain a healthy distance from people is not enough to do, given the size of the problem. So how do we keep ourselves mentally well for what could be a reasonably long period of time in relative isolation and relative unknown?
I think the first thing to do is to tap into how you're feeling, but also to tap into what you've done in the past to manage different emotions and to draw on those experiences and memories of what worked before. So if when you're going through challenging times, you find an activity such as meditation practice of some sort, remember to put it into practice. So like you did with the sort of three slow breaths, to instantly sort of calm down the nervous system, and you automatically feel that little bit better. It's putting these things into a daily routine. I think every day we can set that intention of, how am I going to manage today, and make sure that I come out at the end feeling okay, as well as can be expected. I think having a place that you can go to in the house or the home, or if you're going outside, and at the moment we are still allowed outside, do you have a space that you go to feel calm, to enjoy that sense of peace with the world? And for somebody like, I mean, for myself, I use nature. I'm out every day. I need to spend at least 30, 45 minutes outside, communing with the great big world, to look at the sky, to look at the trees, to listen to the birds song. All that is an essential component to my well-being. So I try to incorporate that into my daily routine. And I guess if you're confined to home because you're in social isolation or whatever, you can still achieve that, even if you're having to look out through a window, or, you know, just open the door and look outside. It's finding that place of calm. And if it's a different place of calm that you would normally go to, just adjust and sort of get curious about what that other place might be. It could be a different room in your house that you can just close the door and spend some quiet time just being on your own, or listening to some beautiful music or something like that. It's these simple things that we do for ourselves and also do for others that can make the biggest difference. And I think I'm touching my face, naughty, sorry. What I think we can do is get better at noticing what's going on for other people, because our own mental well-being is enhanced so much when we do things for others. And like you say, with the bushfires, we felt that we could actually do something tangible, and that's great. But we can still do many tangible things in this situation, whether it's calling up the neighbour, popping around just to sort of say, are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with? Do you need some shopping brought round to you? It's these little tiny interactions. And I also heard on a different call where people were sharing that this time where we're coming together virtually more often, where we're looking at each other face to face on a screen, is actually making us feel closer. Which is bizarre in a way, because we can't physically touch each other. But I think just having that eye contact and hearing what we're sharing with each other is enormously calming and helps to, again, maintain our well-being, because we can be vulnerable, we can share the truth, and when people sort of witness that, then the first thing they want to do is put up their hand and say, how can I help? And that brings people together. And I think this is going to be critical as we move forward, as we are increasingly required to remove ourselves from the circumstance where we can engage face to face. This is what is going to make a biggest difference to our mental well-being, well as the lifestyle stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what a few people have been saying about the social distancing. They're saying we should be calling it physical distancing, not social distancing. Yeah. I think it's a nice distinction. For me, it'll be, especially as an extrovert, pretty important to stay connected with people and socially connected with people. That'll just have to look quite different to how it has historically. So for me, that distinction is useful: physical distancing rather than social distancing. You also mentioned routine in there, Jenny. Certainly one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the things that I had in my day and week that were about staying well, mentally particularly, things like training jiu-jitsu 3 times a week. That's quite obviously off the cards now, given that you couldn't get much more physical proximity to a group of people. And that was a regular thing in the calendar that was very rarely missed. And I imagine that for many people, things like gyms, churches, cafes, clubs, pubs, they're all closed down now. So a lot of people's regular routines, support groups that they were part of, a lot of those things can't meet face to face anymore.
That's right.
How important do you think it is to establish a new routine for yourself?
I think it's vital. I think this is where we just have to get creative and inventive and say, well, I can't get down to the gym, so what am I going to do instead? What have I got available in the house that I could use? What can I filch from the kids, from their toy box, their cupboards, that will help me to engage in some sort of physical activity? There's so many things you can do. I mean, you can dance to music, for example. You can put on all sorts of different things and interact while they're showing on a screen. So it's just about being mindful that although your existing routine has now changed up, that doesn't mean that you abandon routine. It's actually more important than ever to establish a new routine, and then choosing what's going to be in that and how it's going to look.
I've had a couple of really interesting questions from a few people about how far do you go down the line of considering worst case scenario. So people have kind of put that in all kinds of different forms, depending on, I think what comes to mind is whatever people happen to be most anxious about. So, it can take the form of income, food, what if something else happens on top of this? And as a survivalist, that's a game I play quite a bit of, but I'm also really conscious that it's something I'm quite mentally robust for. I can play worst case scenario games without taking myself down a spiral of despair, where I'll go, let's contemplate what if, and just kind of be a bit mentally prepared for that. I read an interesting little statement earlier today that said, just because you've been kind and a good person that won't make you immune from coronavirus and other things that might happen to you. That's a bit like being a vegan and expecting an angry bull not to charge you. Which
very true.
I thought was kind of a nice picture.
Yeah.
What's your thought about that? You know, I think there's pros and cons for considering how pear-shaped things could get. For me, it's very much about not doing that if it takes you down an unhelpful mental landscape.
Exactly. And I think it depends on your individual circumstances too. I've got a very elderly mother who lives in aged care, so the family have been having a number of conversations about the what if the aged care facility goes into lockdown, which it now has. What if she becomes unwell, and nobody can sort of be there with her during that time. And I think there are certain situations where I think it is helpful to have the conversation. It's not necessarily a comfortable conversation, but I think it can be helpful then. But I certainly think it's not helpful if you buy into the catastrophizing. What if then morphs into this big thing, which then becomes all consuming, and then we sort of run around like, we're all going to die, which is certainly not the case. And I think this is where tuning into deciding what is actually relevant to us and tuning out the noise which could be contributing to add to the what ifs, which is particularly the media at the moment. Because we've got 24/7 media input, and I don't think they're talking about anything else except the infection, and that's not particularly helpful. I mean, how many updates do you need per day? I would suggest probably relatively few. So I think we can be mindful just to dial down the noise, so that we've then got the headspace to tackle those conversations that we do need to have, and that could be more helpful. So if you've got children that live away, how are you going to sort of manage to keep in contact? How are you going to make sure they're okay? What if they've lost their job already? How are we going to? We do need to be talking about these things, but it's managing it. I think that is, and there's no one solution fits all. There's it's unique to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I think that the line in there is to have the conversations or do the thinking exercises to whatever degree you personally find helpful. And as you say, avoiding that catastrophization is pretty key. I'm not even sure if that's a word, but it is now.
We can make it up as a word, Mike.
That's it. On the news front, obviously we're surrounded by quite a bit of stuff, and it's not all accurate. Between social media, people passing it on, and even some of the things coming from relatively authoritative positions, the President of the United States being one notable example, who seems to come out with some fairly random stuff at the minute. What's your take on sort of sense checking information as you come across it?
I think this boils down to something I heard. I'm not sure if it was on Q&A or a different program or what, but it's basically, this is the time to be listening to the science, the scientists, and the people who have the medical understanding and understanding and the knowledge. I think so many people have opinions, and I think sometimes there's a bit of wishful thinking. And I've been on the receiving end of all sorts of stuff, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness me, people really think like that or believe that. And it's very disconcerting, because that with social media channels, it can spread like wildfire. So I do think we need to be very judicious in sort of who we trust as a source of information, and to make, the World Health Organization is putting up a daily an update. So if you do want something that's accurate, I would be very happy to go to their website and say, okay, what's the story here today? I don't need to have endless television programs or radio programs discussing what if, because I don't think it's helpful, and it leads to misinterpretation as well.
Yeah, for me, I've tended to, I've don't watch a lot of TV news anyway, but I've tended to go back to good old ABC, because they tend to be a reasonably reliable source. And, you know, for me personally, I think checking in about twice a day at the beginning and the end of the day seems to be a pretty logical pattern. There was a while there where I was tapped into just about anything that I could find about it. And, you know, you take yourself down a pretty dark rabbit hole fairly quickly with that, which isn't helpful. We've talked a lot, not in prep for this call, but on other occasions, about gratitude and how important that is. And I saw a beautiful question from, I can't remember what the source was, this morning on a LinkedIn feed that said, a great question to ask right now is, what does this make possible? Takes us out of that mindset of, it's all doom and gloom. What does this make possible? And I thought, what a fantastic reframe, and that it made me, you know, I'm quite explicit in just about everything I do, that gratitude is such a great way to rewire how we think and to shift our negativity bias, which is a big thing that humans have. Have you got any tips specifically around gratitude and ways to do that for yourself and with your family and colleagues at this time?
I think again, it can become part of our daily routine. Just the practice of showing gratitude. And for years, you know, I kept a gratitude journal, and it's been shown quite clearly in the research that even journaling gratitude for each day for 3 weeks will raise your level of optimism for 6 months. Well, I think that's a pretty good return on investment.
It's not bad, is it?
It's not bad. So, you know, just taking a couple of minutes out of your day just to stop and reflect, you know, what am I grateful for? Who am I grateful for? Because it's not just things, it's the people around us as well. And I think taking the opportunity to actually express that gratitude directly to the person themselves is enormously beneficial for the giver and the receiver, because the receiver goes, whoa, that's lovely. And it makes us feel good too. So it boosts our feel good hormones. And it just helps us to feel better about most things. So I think we can just practice gratitude on so many levels. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be the little things as well. Thank you for making me a cup of coffee. Thank you for taking the time to call me today. We haven't spoken for a week or two. Just those little things can make a biggest difference.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the most profound pieces of research that I've read about gratitude really highlights that the size of what you're grateful for actually has almost no impact. Grateful for a little bird in the garden or someone making a cup of tea is just as profound as being grateful for something huge, like not being in a hospital in Italy right now, for example.
Exactly.
And the impact on your personal well-being and your resilience is pretty much the same either way, which is bloody awesome. I reckon it's, as you say, it's a fantastic. It's a fantastic way to significantly mitigate stress, and in situations like these, a really powerful tool that we can use.
And I think it links into kindness as well, because when you're coming from a place of gratitude, it's so much easier to show kindness and compassion to each other. And I think at this time, again, it's those little acts of kindness that resonate very strongly with us, because it's, thank you for noticing. Thank you for that little thing. It's really, really important. And it doesn't matter what it is. So, you know, you might be down the supermarket. I mean, I try to avoid going down to the supermarket at the moment because I find that a bit of a stressful environment. But when you hear of people who maybe have picked up an item in the supermarket, and maybe they've picked up two, and then they notice that somebody else doesn't have that, and they just choose to say, hey, I can see you wanted a packet. Here's one of mine. Just these little things that we do to show we're human, we're compassionate, we're looking out for each other, showing we're caring about each other, I think will go a long way to support everybody through this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Jenny, I'm going to hop back to you in a second. We'll just get contact details and things for people who want to be in touch with either of us. In the meanwhile, I'd just like to quickly grab Jason Clark and have a quick chat to him. Jason, you're going to be on the call next week, and the reason for that is years ago I did a short workshop with you, and you outlined some really fantastic decision-making tools. Jason's founder of a business called Minds at Work that helps businesses and people think creatively and well. So I figured that there's lots of awkward and difficult decisions that people are having to make right now, and a revisit of that tool could be really good. Can you give us a sort of 30-second snapshot of what we'll be into next week, Jason?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep,
Is it coming
beautifully.
Through? Yep, terrific. Look, I've been teaching thinking skills for about 20 years, and decision-making along with problem solving has been one of my two favourite topics. And what I've been doing is collecting tools you can use on the back of an envelope. And these are tools that not only have I taught extensively, I've used them extensively in some pretty difficult, literally life and death decisions that I've had to face and my family's had to face in the last 10 years or so. So these are things I absolutely swear by, and they allow you to pull apart a decision into its components and to weigh them up. And it'll also show you how to make decisions if you don't have enough information, which is kind of exactly where we are now.
Yeah,
so I was thrilled to see that Mike has started this, and I put my hand up and said, I would love to share that with the group.
Great. Thanks very much, Jason. I look forward to chatting to you at 2 o'clock Perth time next week. And if you've got big decisions that you're facing, that will be a great call to be on, and lots and lots of practical and tangible stuff that you'll be able to use and take away out of that session. So if you also, for family and friends, if you know people that would benefit from that, by all means invite them along, share the invite with them.
Spread it around.
Spread it around, yeah. Make that viral. That'd be better than some of the other contagious crap that's going on. Thanks, Jason. We'll talk to you next week. So, Jenny, just in terms of people being in touch with you, if they wanted to know more or get a bit of support over this period of time, what's the best way that they can do that?
Easiest way is probably by email, Mike. So it's Jenny with a Y at Dr. Jenny Brockis with a little DR for the doctor, BROCKIS.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody. Happy to chat anytime, answer any questions. Be awesome.
Great. Thanks very much, Jenny. We'll include that in the mail out with the recording of this week and the invite for next week. And the same invite applies to me too. You can get in touch with me at mike@mikehouse.com.au to discuss anything, throw questions at us, sessions or people that you'd like to hear from in these chats. We'll be doing them at 2 p.m. Perth time until morale improves or the situation abates, whichever happens first. Look, thank you very much for joining us on the conversation. It's an important way to stay connected, and we plan to keep bringing you useful stuff. We'll see you all next week. Have fun and stay safe. See ya.